Does the length of the jump rope that works for you change depending on your height? In this activity, your students will test different jump rope lengths to find the length that works best for them. They'll measure and record their height along with the length of their favorite jump rope and use this data to create a graph. Your students will look for patterns on their graphs and then use their observations to make predictions. Before you start, it's a good idea to let your students know that this is not a competition. Jump rope skills are not essential for you or for your students. Begin by gathering materials for this activity. You will need a cotton clothesline or other type of rope cut into 10-foot lengths, one for each group of 4 to 6 students. Standard measurement tools like yardsticks or tape measure. Non-standard measurement tools like feet, sneakers, or hands. Graph paper, markers, colored dots, pencils. 1 copy per group of the Going to Great Lengths data collection sheet, which can be found on page JU12. And 1 copy per group of the standard unit data chart, which can be found on page JU13. You can also use regular chart paper instead. First, ask your students what type of rope games they've played. This will get them thinking about jump ropes and how they can be used as tools. Divide your students into groups of 4 to 6. Give each group a length of 10-foot long clothesline and have your students take a turn using it to jump rope. This won't be easy for your students, so many of them may naturally begin to shorten the length of the rope by wrapping the ends around their hands. After having some fun with this activity, ask your students what constitutes the perfect length. Take suggestions from the different groups and write down every response on a board or in a large piece of paper. After some time, decide as a class what the most desirable traits are to determine the perfect length of jump rope. Write these traits in a prominent place for the whole class to see. This is a pretty important step to help your students think critically after experimentation. Use another large piece of paper and student suggestions to decide which standard unit of measure you should pick to measure jump rope length and student height. Have examples ready for inches, centimeters, meters, and feet so students can easily pick the most appropriate one. If you didn't have rulers or measuring tapes, what else could you use to measure for this activity? Try asking your class and recording their answers. Can they measure things using their hands? What about by using their feet? Take all suggestions and review the list. Explain that these are called nonstandard measurements. As a group, pick one of these nonstandard units to use. Now that we've defined our terms and selected our units of measurement, go ahead and distribute the Going to Great Lengths data collection sheet to each group. Ask the students to measure the height of each jumper using both the standard and non-standard units. Have them record their measurements on the sheet. Once everyone has measured their height in both units, instruct the students to jump rope again with the same piece of clothesline, this time adjusting the length until it is just right. Once they have each found their perfect length, they should measure it with both the standard and non-standard units, and record it on the data sheet next to their height. Ask each group to share their findings. How did their non-standard units compare to their standard units? Which unit is easier to use? Give them time to answer and listen carefully, then ask why they think there are standard units. A fun way to show your students that non-standard units can change over time is comparing your shoe size to theirs. Is there a size difference between you and your students? What about between each student? Ask your students if they think their hands and feet will be the same sized unit in 10 years. What about if they had measured their ropes 5 years ago? Next, have your students organize their data in a way that might show a pattern. Does arranging the data by height from shortest to tallest show any particular trend? What about the other way around? Does the data show a relationship between the height of a person and the length of the rope they need? Here's a hint. It may be fun to have students line up from the shortest perfect rope length to the longest. Do the students see a pattern? Use the standard unit data chart or chart paper to create a table by recording each student's data, starting with the shortest and ending with the tallest. Do the students see any patterns in the class data? Do the tallest students need the longest jump ropes? Recording data on a table is one way to see patterns for sure, but another, sometimes even better way to see patterns is to organize the data in the form of a graph. On a large sheet of paper, sketch out a graph with the x-axis, the horizontal line, labeled student height, and the y-axis, the vertical line, labeled jump rope length. Help your students fill out this graph by placing a colored dot where their height and rope length meet. When the graph is complete, there should be a pretty obvious trend in the dots. Ask your students if they see a pattern and give them time to really observe the graph. What does the graph show? Did the shorter students use shorter ropes? Did the taller students use longer ropes? Your students may notice that this graph does not show a straight line, but instead the dots are scattered in a general pattern. This type of graph is called a scatter graph, and the general trend of the scattered dots is called a trend line. Have a student or two help you draw in pencil a straight line from the shortest jumper's dot to the tallest jumper's dot. Are most of the other dots near the line? Have a few more students help you redraw the line to best reflect the data, keeping it smooth, but having it lie as close as possible to the most dots. Dots that are far, far apart from the others are called outliers. There will probably be one or two in your graph. Be sure to point them out. Graphs are powerful tools because they help us make predictions. Point out the 6-foot mark on your graph and ask the students to predict how long they think a 6-foot-tall person's rope will need to be. Can they follow the trend line to make that prediction? If you have more time, you can keep the activity going. How long does a rope need to be for the best game of double dutch? What about with 2 people at once? How long will the rope need to be with 3? When your students record their data and graph it to make predictions, they are practicing math and science in the real world. The possibilities are literally endless.
Changing the Equation, after-school math curriculum brought to you by Explora. Funding provided by Sandia National Laboratories. Find more Changing the Equation videos at explora.us/changing-the-equation.